Peter, thank you for talking to me. Before I ask you about the events of June the 24th, 1978, can you tell me a bit about your involvement previously in activism?
Oh yes, I became involved in the student movement in 1975, and I was a student at Macquarie University. I was active in the Australian Union of Students, which helped organise the first National Homosexual Conference, and I took part in a lot of other, political activity to do with education issues or East Timor, or various things that were important at the time. And I was a member of the Communist Party from 1975. By 1978, I'd been an organiser for the Australian Union of Students for 1 year, but in that year I was no longer a student and I was unemployed. So I was a bit on the loose in mid-1978.
So how did you get involved in the events of the 24th of June 1978?
Well, I think I was no longer really connected to a campus group, but I had a lot of friends who were involved. And also in the Communist Party, we had a homosexual collective, and the ideas that ended up with the Mardi Gras, they were certainly discussed at length there. So I was aware, that there was a sort of a controversy about this Mardi Gras idea, but we as a group in the party and in the broader sort of student area were really happy with the idea. And so even though I wasn't really going to any meetings much, when the posters, say, were printed, I was in teams to paste them up, and so I was fully sort of aware of the arguments which were going on, which were something like, it's a political sellout to organise a thing like this, what are you doing? Or this is a great idea to provide a space for people to come out and express themselves in a way where they're inhibited in a political rally. So, it was an interesting discussion. It took many months before it came to fruition, but Stonewall Day was the target day.
3 events took place on the 24th of June 1978. Now, the first one was a march down George Street in the morning. Were you present for that?
No, I didn't take part in that. I only took part in the Mardi Gras.
So the second event at Paddington Town Hall, you weren't there either?
There was a special forum held, but I didn't go to that. Yeah.
So the event in the evening, who do you credit with organising that?
Well, I think a loose collection of people, including, so I'll have trouble with the names a bit, but Lance Garland was a close friend, so I certainly remember Lance's role, and I think he was important in the practicalities of really making it happen. That is, getting the police permit, getting the sound vehicle and that sort of thing. So he drove it, but Marg McCann was another person who was very prominent, I think, in getting the idea up. And I'm going to forget the guy's name.
Did you mention Ron Alston?
Ron Austin, I think, also was a sort of a key person in that. But then there was others that we all know, Sally Colchin and Di Minnis. There was Margaret Lyons. Many actually people I knew from the student movement. They're all around. They're all involved in some way or other, connected.
And it began at Taylor Square.
Yes.
Do you remember what the atmosphere was like at the beginning?
I wasn't there at the beginning. So there I was late for the Mardi Gras.
So had it started taking place by the time you arrived? Were people already marching?
There wasn't a march. So I met them as they got to the bottom of Oxford Street. I was really shocked. First of all, how could it have started on time? And how could it be finishing before it even starts?
What sort of time do you think it started?
I can't remember now. But I thought, I'm 5 minutes late. That's what I thought. I had a friend dropping me off, and we got to Hyde Park, and I could see it coming down the street. So I just jumped out and joined. But it was, one of those moments where I thought, it's crazy already, But anyway, I was glad I connected, So really the whole thing, I talked to Lance a lot about it afterwards. So he said that it was so infuriating that they had a route that was agreed with the police, which involved going to different bars in different side streets off Oxford Street, and they were denied from the very beginning, the police just rushed them down, straight down Oxford Street. That's why it was over in like 10 to 15 minutes.
So they were pressured to go faster and faster down Oxford Street.
Yeah.
So they had a permit.
Yes.
Do you know what the permit included exactly?
I haven't seen a written copy of it, but I'm pretty sure that there'll be a photo copy of that somewhere, if not the original. And as far as I know from Lance, it said that it was a street parade. There would be music, there would be dancing, and it would go, this specific route, so they could pick up these different locations. And even in the 10 to 15 minutes that they were going, they swelled to a number that I think as organisers we didn't imagine, or we weren't sure what we would get. But we were in the thousands, and it started in the hundreds. So there you go. It was a brilliant success.
And although you'd missed it going down Oxford Street,
Yeah.
people had come out of the bars as well, hadn't they?
That's how it happened. Yeah. So people just came out of those venues and joined. And they had the posters around, so they knew it was coming along. And the music was on, and people were in costume. And so it was a sort of inviting spectacle.
You mentioned music. Do you remember any of the songs?
No, because I got out of my friend's vehicle and walked into it, and Lance was driving that vehicle there. I can't really remember the music, but the main thing that happened was the cops just monstered him like right in front of my eyes. So
when you say monster, do you mean grabbed him?
yeah, they ripped the door open. They tried to drag him out. He was hanging onto the steering wheel, and a lot of people fought over Lance's body. So he was a bit pulled here and there. But in fact, they got the truck, took the sound system away, and Lance was not arrested. So that was one of the nice things. But that was like an electric moment. Like as soon as I got there was a fight of sorts going on, and the police was so negative and aggressive, and there was a sort of apprehension among everybody there, even though they were incredibly excited, and bubbling is not quite right, but it was something like that. It was like, what are we going to do now? Because we only just got started. That was the feeling.
So what did people do?
Somebody just said, let's go to the cross. And the organizer in me, my heart sank, because I knew we hadn't a clue what would happen next, and it's a lot of people. But as I said, the enthusiasm was very strong. There was a lot of anger already apparent against the police, and there was a fear that there were a lot of police inside Hyde Park waiting to beat us up. So the plan had been it would finish in Hyde Park South, but no one went into Hyde Park actually. And so you're not going to Hyde Park, you're going to do something. So King's Cross was obvious. And as soon as that call went out, I think there was only one megaphone in the whole crowd, so actually you couldn't communicate properly to people. So when the word of mouth just went through the crowd, everyone just turned right and headed off down towards William Street. And when we got there, there's a big police sergeant standing in the middle of the intersection directing the traffic to stop and directing us up William Street. So the police also planned this as well.
So when people went down William Street, were they running? Were they walking? Were they shouting? What sort of atmosphere?
It was a lot of shouting of slogans.
Do you remember any?
Yes. Yeah. It's the hard part.
It brings back all the memories.
Yep. The chants were things like "Get your laws off our bodies," and especially to stop the police attacks.
Was it like stop police attacks on gays, women and blacks? Those kind of slogans.
That's it.
Why do you
slogan?
Why do you find it so emotional?
Because there was a lot of there's a lot of violence. Just too much hate.
And almost 40 years later,
It's the same.
It's the same. It doesn't get easier.
Well, it was bad then, and the truth is, it's bad now. So that's that's where I cannot quite get a sense of distance from this. So when I talk about it, it's difficult, especially that. Yeah, so it was a very excited march by then. So we went a classic protest march style, without the banners, etc., but with the slogans like that. And I was very worried because I could see at Darlinghurst Road, as it crossed King's Cross, there were so many police wagons. It was I lost count at 35. I remember counting.
35.
So it was a huge operation by the police.
You'd gone down William Street.
We were going down William Street, and you could look forward and see, under the Coca-Cola sign, you could see van after van after
Shocking.
van. Yeah,
All waiting.
all moving into King's Cross.
So then you went down to Darlinghurst Road.
And you go up.
So Darlinghurst Road, and then you do a left at Darlinghurst Road towards the fountain.
Yeah. But even before we got to Darlinghurst Road, I peeled off, found a little cafe with a phone, and telephoned a lawyer friend to say we're going to have a lot of trouble here.
So you knew.
Just be ready for a call. Well, I obviously, you don't have that many police deployed, that way, and without them intending to do something, So.
And some people I've spoken to say that people came out of the bars and clubs in King's Cross. Do you remember any of that?
Well, when we were walking down Darlinghurst Road, it was another sort of grand celebratory moment. I wouldn't say people joined us on the street, but they all came out and cheered out of the balconies and windows all along. It was a great, funny moment. I mean, it's a fun place, King's Cross. In those days, it was really vibrant, and the people just thought it was just terrific that we turned up. Wow, with the extra element to the night. But when we reached El Alamein Fountain, we were very, the whole group realised we were in a bit of a dead end. We were in trouble. We had to get out of there somehow, because once you reached there, at that time, the street lighting went down. It was really quite dark, and it's close to a police station. There were police vehicles on every side street we walked past. So we were all very aware of the police just menacingly present. And there was a police officer who spoke to us there, but as I said, there's only one megaphone. There's a couple of thousand people, and not everyone heard everything. But the cop was saying, "You've got to disperse," and our lot was saying, "Well, okay, we will leave the area, but we've got to do it in an orderly way. So we will just turn around and we'll walk out of King's Cross, and we won't be chanting or anything like that." Well, the cop just said, nothing as far as I can recall. We just turned, and I remember linking arms with two friends. I wasn't in the front row, maybe I was 20 or 30 rows back even. And we were silent, and we were worried. And you could see the police on either side. And but when we got into the straight stretch of Darlinghurst Road, it all ended there. So
what stage were you surrounded?
Well, I wouldn't say we were surrounded. What I'd think was I was with my friends walking towards King's Cross down Darlinghurst Road, and a police vehicle with its spotlights on, so it was a blinding light, drove straight into the front of the group, say 20 or 30 rows ahead of me, straight into them. And I could just see silhouettes of police and people flying through the air in these lights. So the three of us, all experienced in protests, so we all went forward and tried to grab people who were on the ground and drag them away out of the way of the police, hopefully to avoid them being arrested, but certainly not kicked or punched or something like that. But I was arrested almost immediately. So I ran straight into a cop. I remember dragging someone. I just ran straight into a cop, and he just grabbed me by the arm and threw me through the air, and I landed in a doorway of a police wagon in which there were already people.
Before you'd been arrested, Did you witness firsthand violence from the police to people who've been on that parade?
Oh yeah, well that's what I described
Mm.
there. What I saw in the headlights of the
And what
van.
was
Of the
happening?
van.
Were they using their batons? Were they using their
I
fists?
I don't think there were any batons. I think that they were kicking people on the ground and punching them. That's what I think they were doing. And you know, it's like a strobe light effect for that blinding light and just blackened figures moving. But obviously, some were in uniform and others were on the ground.
And what do you think motivated the police? Was it you standing up to authority? Was it homophobia? Was it issues with the state government at the time?
Well, you know, at the time, it was routine for police to be really quite brutal to demonstrations. This was a different type of situation. It really wasn't a demonstration. And I really don't know what, at the time, I don't think I thought about the police's motivation. I think by then the drama of it was so huge. And I just knew it was like a really huge event I was in. And you know, none of us had dreamed when we started out earlier that evening that it would be like this. So I was a bit, you know, first I was really pissed off that I was in the police wagon so fast. And second, I started to think, what is going on? And looking through the window of the paddy wagon, I could see people skirmishing with the police all over the street. There were just so many fistfights and sort of wrestlings going on, and people in buildings in King's Cross were on our side. They were hurling boxes from balconies. They were chucking rubbish bins. There were things flying through the air. And I think this was my moment when I thought, wow, we've never stood up to the police like this. So, you know, I sort of grabbed that idea, and then I said to everyone in my wagon, look, they're having a really hard time out there. Maybe they won't manage the situation. Let's make it harder for them. If they try to put anyone in here, let's jump out. And everyone said yes. So
You were plotting from inside the paddy wagon.
so when they did open the door, I had to be the first one out. And I think I can't remember how it happened. I'm pretty sure in this case I stood up and a policeman immediately punched me straight in the forehead. So I was sort of stunned, and he grabbed me enough and was able to put us all back in except for two. And then a new one was there as well.
A replacement.
So we had, I can't remember, there were two women, there were five at the start. And after the first attempt to leave the wagon, the first two got away. So then there were four of us in there. Because a fourth person got put in. That was Graham Chuck. He's a good friend of mine.
I've interviewed him.
Yeah. And so there's the four of us. And then the really funny thing happened, if you ask me. But Graham says in his slow way, he said, oh, I've got an idea. He said, when they open that door again, let's all jump out.
Bless him.
So I said, right, Graham, okay, you go first. so he did. He went first, and because they did open the door again. And so he went first, I came second, and the two lesbians came next. And this time I think I dropped my bag or something like that, and I bent down to pick it up. That was enough of a pause for them to grab me. And they threw the four of us back in, but no new ones. So whoever they thought they would put in the wagon, they couldn't put in. So, and they never tried again that night. So, you know, I thought, oh, well, you know, we've done our best sort of thing.
And you weren't handcuffed, were you?
No.
At any of this point?
Oh, no.
How were you feeling? Were you terrified? Were you angry? Was there a feeling of adrenaline?
There's a lot of adrenaline in those sort of situations. So, you know, you're very, very heightened alert about what's going on around you. There's a lot of apprehension in these situations. You know, basically, once you're in that wagon, you're in the hands of the police, and something will happen, you know, down the track. And once, you know, we were kept in that wagon, and then they took us to the police station after a long time, I knew, well, something bad could happen at the other end, you know, because of the whole night and because of what we had done in the wagon. And so, again, I think I was rather calm. You know, looking back, I was just aware that it could go bad. But when we got there to Darlinghurst Police Station, which was a long time, I can't, remember. Maybe we were in that wagon in Darlinghurst Road for about 45 minutes before the whole thing sort of moved. So the police were having a very hard time of it. Anyway, we got to that police station. They backed the wagon in and opened the door, and this big guy said, you and you out and you stay. And that was me. I was the one who had to stay. So then I thought, oh, it's not going to end well. But I had no idea really what was coming. So it's...
Why were you singled out?
I think it's just arbitrary. Really, I do.
It was random.
Yeah. Yeah. The Darlinghurst police were notorious for violence, and there was routine for them to bash people just to teach them a lesson. So it doesn't really matter who you bash, you're going to teach a lesson. I think that's what it's behind it.
A question I've not asked anybody, but it occurs to me, were all the police officers that you remember male, or were there any women police officers?
They're all male that I saw.
All male. So you were taken to the police, you were left in the van alone.
Yeah, maybe for 10 minutes or something like that.
And what happened in that 10 minutes?
Nothing at all.
Nothing. You were just left there?
Yeah.
With nobody in there with you?
No.
Really?
Yeah. So what they were doing was taking those 3 people and placing them somewhere in the jail or in the police station, and then the guy came back for me. So that was just a matter of, putting people in different places.
Then when he came back for you, what happened then?
Oh, it's you out now, and there were two police officers, and one of them had me by the sort of coat and pushing me into the station, a long corridor. I went past many cell doors, and sort of a U shape it took, and the corridor ended with a room which had like vaulting horses and other gym type equipment in it, like a junk room or something. And then the police, the big guy, just turned around and started really yelling at me and bashing me in the head, so fist in the head.
When you say he yelled, was it homophobic abuse or just abuse?
Oh, well, it wasn't particularly homophobic abuse. It was, very, very abusive, though. Yeah, you fucking little cunt, you're not so fucking smart now, you fucking ass, I'm going to bash you. He was purple with rage. So it was like a completely demented and out of control. And he's a big man. I'm a little person. So, he had a lot of force behind those blows. And he punched me I wouldn't remember how many times I was hit in the head. So it was enough to sort of belt me all around the walls of that room. So it was, I don't know. I can't recall any noise, just him yelling and just trying to stay up. And he then hit me in the solar plexus, so I was knocked down on the ground. And by then I started to have convulsions, so I completely lost control of my body. It was flipping around. And they gave me an almighty kick in the leg. And I thought, wow, I'm going to die here. But the second police officer at that point said, that's enough. In a relatively quiet voice, that's enough, maybe twice, and he stopped hitting me. So then they...
Did he have to physically pull his colleague off? Or
No, he just stopped. Yeah, he just stopped. So then they picked me up. I couldn't stand up. And then it was more yelling, you're not so smart now, very weird stuff, But they dragged me then to a cell where I was just put by myself.
On your own?
Yeah. So I was really freaked out then.
Were you aware at that point that there were protests happening outside?
Yes, I could hear people yelling.
Do you remember what any of them were yelling? No.
I can't.
If you don't feel comfortable saying,
it's too hard. It's too hard in some ways, but they were yelling my name. That's the thing that I remembered the most. That I was mystified how they knew anything had happened to me, and
how did they know?
I've no idea.
And did a doctor see you at any point?
Yeah, later. I was left in that cell for maybe half an hour or an hour, and then taken to the dock. So I'm not sure what time we were talking. Maybe about 3 o'clock in the morning. They jammed all of us into this little sort of space where the main desk of the police station is, the charge room or whatever it's called, and we were there for a long time. I was feeling incredibly sick and so badly concussed, and then at a certain point, maybe around 3:30, 4 o'clock, this policeman came in and asked for me and took me to another room. So I was a bit worried about what would happen. But there was Dr. Jim Walker and a lawyer who I don't know now his name, but I've got a record of it, and a really very senior police officer. I can just remember a very big guy in full uniform with a lot of braid on his shoulder. And anyway, Jim examined me. There was a lot of bruising on my leg already and bruising around my scalp, and there was bruising around my abdomen. And he said, look, I don't know that there's any broken bones, but there could be, and we have to really get this guy to the hospital, have a proper x-ray and a check. And the senior police officer just stood there for a couple of minutes. And I think he talked to another policeman, and then he just said, no, take him back to the charge room. So the lawyer did talk to me, but I can't recall that conversation.
Were those who'd been arrested counselling you, checking you were okay, helping you out?
We were not in a position to be doing that. You know, I was jammed into that charge room dock next to the two women who'd been in my van, and I didn't recognise them. I said, "Oh, look, I'm Peter. You know, I've been really badly beaten up." And they said, "Yeah, we know who you are."
So they knew as well.
We know who you are. You know?
The grapevine.
So they just said, look, just hang on, you know, we hope we can get out of here. Because there was not even a glass of water.
Nothing.
You know? Yeah, so I think it was around 4:30 when they started to release people on bail, and maybe I was the third or fourth person who managed to get out.
Do you know much about the bail situation?
I have no idea. You know, I can't even recall how much it was, but I've got the documents still. It wasn't $100. It might have been $40, something like that, which was still pretty stiff in those days. And Meredith Bergman was there, and she took me to St Vincent's Hospital, you know, and then I think we stayed at St Vincent's for an hour in the emergency, and no one came to check that. They made me lay down, but no one came to look at me, you know. And I thought after a while they're not going to look at me, and I still felt so bad. So I said to Meredith, we should just go, you know, and so she drove me. I think she did this. She drove past the Central Police Station in the city, because women had been transferred from Darlinghurst to there, but she couldn't get any information on. So pretty quickly then we drove on to Glebe, and we woke up, or we saw Pat O'Shane, who was a lawyer then, and just explained to her what happened and what advice did she have. And she just said, well, you've got to appear, you know, and then see what you can do about finding out who it was who beat you up. And then I just went home and rested, you know, and so that was Sunday, and on the Monday we had to appear. So I went to the Royal Prince Alfred emergency and got x-rayed first thing in the morning, as soon as I could get in. And they were, you know, compared to St Vincent's, it was a remarkably different treatment, really. But lucky the x-ray showed there were no broken bones, but I was having a very hard time walking. Anyway, we got to the court. We had to appear at 10 a.m. When I got there, maybe, you know, 9:30, quarter to 10, there was lots of police, there were lots of people there to support us, and the doors of the court were locked. You know, and come 10 o'clock, there we were with our bail forms and the summonses, which are saying you must appear, knocking on the door. And I remember the door, there were so many cops there, and the door opened, a policeman stood in the way and yelled at us something. Then he punched me in the head. So
At the court?
yeah. So we were saying, listen, mate, you've got a problem because we have to get in there, you know. And so I think he had to be instructed by a magistrate to let us in. You know, there was a sort of, I would say, a sort of extreme hysterical response by the police that morning. You know, so that was much more, to me, overtly homophobic and really hate for us.
So what happened in the courtroom?
Oh, yes. Well, there were 53 people arrested, so we all had to appear, and we had to show those forms to get the bail money back, to give back to the people who bailed us out. All of that took place pretty quick. But there we are sitting, and you have to wait, you know, like there's a long list of items, you know, on the court notice, and wasn't too long, maybe by 11 o'clock, the magistrate's starting to call our matters. And, you know, 2 or 3 people pleaded guilty, and then everyone else started pleading not guilty. And then my name got called, and we said, I had a representation from the Redfern Legal Centre, and my solicitors there was Virginia Bell. She said, well, we won't be pleading because where are the arresting officers? And the magistrate agreed, okay, we'll call for them to appear. You have to come back on Thursday. And I think it was something like that, maybe Wednesday. And we turned up again on the Wednesday, and no police. So it was put over till the Friday. And on the Friday, the 2 ones who were involved in beating me up, they did appear. And so we had their names, and then so Virginia and I went to the chamber magistrate and took out a writ of assault against them. So it's called a chamber warrant or something like that. So there I was charging them with assault, and they had charged me with three offences. So after that, there's always a long delay before the matters start to really take shape. And we had this big campaign to drop the charges. So I was very, incapacitated by what had taken place, but stubborn, so it's complicated how you react to these things. But one thing I got it in my head that policeman wanted to stop me dead and never, ever do anything again. So I just found it in myself to keep going. So I went to the Stanley Palmer Sports Centre place where we had the big meeting. I had lost my spectacles in King's Cross that night, so I still didn't have any glasses, and it was hard to see people a little distance from me properly. But anyway, we had a big meeting to plan that campaign, and there was a lot of argument, but at least I took part in it, and I played a good role in it, and so I feel good about that. We had to decide whether to apply for a permit under the Summary Offences Act to have the protest march, and there was a strong view put by some of the people there that we should defy the Summary Offences Act and not apply for a permit, just have the protest. But this was very difficult for our community to cope with, I remember. So I stood up and said we should apply to keep everyone together, and the problem of the Summary Offences Act we'll have to deal with some other time. So and that's what happened. So the first march, I also took part in it. I can't remember the timing. It's about 3 weeks after the Mardi Gras, so it's not long. And it was thousands and thousands of people, and it was the longest ever route that was ever applied for on a permit, and the police agreed to the whole thing.
Really?
Yeah, because I think that it was very controversial what took place. So we took this long march, and oh gosh, it was incredibly painful for me to walk that distance. And there was a very funny thing happened. We got to the Darlinghurst police station eventually, and the 2 or 3 people who said that they would take care of me and make sure nothing happened to me, all of a sudden they pulled flower bombs out of their coats or bags and started hurling them at the class. They got arrested.
Oh no, it's like a captain.
I was almost in tears, but oh my God, couldn't hardly cope with the stress of that, So yeah, people were very funny, but they were very, very angry at the police. Yeah, that was one of the things that happened. And then another aftermath was that Neville Wran and Frank Walker, who are very prominent figures in the government, had these different reactions to what took place. So Neville Wran went to the media and said how bad it was that we'd beaten up the police in King's Cross and hurt them and stuff like that. And so we had a delegation organised to go and see him. And this was really facilitated by Susan Hawke, who was Bob Hawke's daughter. So she came up to Sydney straight after the Mardi Gras, and she was staying with the people I was in the house I was at. And so she put this together, which was really good of her. And we went to see Neville Wran, and as soon as Susan pulled out a notebook, he sort of hit the roof and said, he said, "I'm not going to have you, position me," or something like that, and walked out of the room. There was like five of us in this delegation, and we had to wait for him to calm down, and Susan had to reassure him. And then he said some, things which I was disappointed at, to say the least. That I guess we said, "Look, you got the wrong impression about what happened. We were doing a peaceful thing, and the police attacked us. We didn't attack them." And I was paraded there as the sort of evidence. I was so badly beaten up, and not that I could say much. And so they were saying to him, "You've got to do something about the police." And he said, "Oh well, we've done the best we can already." That's what he said. "You've got to give me a break.
Right.
It's really hard here in New South Wales." And
so he's quite defensive.
yes, and he didn't give us any undertakings. Yeah.
Really? Now, most of the charges against the 53 people arrested were dropped.
Yes, in February the following year they were dropped
Why do you think they were dropped?
because of the terrific unity we built around the Drop the Charges campaign. So there was so many things happened. We had rallies for Drop the Charges, and then there was also this big event that happened at the end of August in Taylor Square and Hyde Park, which was associated with another National Homosexual Conference. And the Drop the Charges actions continued, but I wasn't able to take part in them. So I haven't got a clear recollection, but I was certainly fully aware. And I was there on the August, I think it was August 28, I can't be sure of the days, 27 or 28, in I wasn't in Taylor Square, I was at Hyde Park. So I was really very cross again at the way the police had attacked our community, and it was such a big political play they were making, and they were so ruthless in the way they did it, especially that event in August. So I was very tuned to what was going on, but physically I was really fading. I had a lot of headaches, and the trauma was very difficult to deal with.
Do you remember much about the gay press at the time? I know it was limited, but was it supportive of that first Mardi Gras parade? Was it supportive of those who'd been arrested?
Yes. The whole community was.
And did any big names, such as politicians or celebrities, come out to support?
I can't recall, right now names, but when we had that Drop the Charges campaign, we had significant Labor Party figures, trade union figures, and legal fraternity or sorority, legal people, they came too. So this is what put the government off balance. And it was a Labor government, so they were open to change, Really, it was a progressive government. So it was a good combination of people. So the trouble for me is I was damaged by the events, and I couldn't play any sort of ongoing role. So my recall is very general, and I do recall receiving the letter from the police in February, which said we've considered the whole situation of all the people charged on June 24, 1978, and we decided to drop the charges against everyone except you. It's because I had the charge outstanding against them. So yeah, that was a bit of a bitter pill, but I was very determined to pursue the charge, and the Redfern Legal Centre was very supportive, really wanted to test that as much as possible.
And you did pursue it?
Well, I couldn't in the end, but I did my best. I think I did my best. So in a sense, we're still pursuing the matter because we're still demanding that the police themselves have to apologise properly for what took place in that year, especially June 24 and August 27.
And bringing it more to the present day, we've had 3 apologies this year in 2016. Now, one of them was the parliamentary apology.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel very happy about it. I think that was a really important achievement for our community, and really it's an important achievement for the society. So it was one of those things. I'd never been to anything like that before, and I'm a natural skeptic about politicians, even the best of them, and come to such pressures. But we had a long gestation of this apology, and I was pretty sure that, especially the MPs I dealt with, which was especially Alex Greenwich, would really not let us down. And when we finally saw the text, we even had some input into the text of that, and it was changed a bit to reflect our concerns. So it not only apologised for what took place on June 24, 1978 and subsequent events that year, but it thanked us for making the society better.
Do you feel the apology was sincere?
Well, the MPs decided to do it, and they decided to do it fulsomely, wholeheartedly, and with their own emotion. So I think it was great.
The apology came from Bruce Notley Smith.
Have to excuse me.
No problem. Some people have suggested the apology should have come from Mike Baird, the Premier himself, instead of being read out by Bruce Notley Smith, the Liberal MP for Coogee. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I can't agree more. So I think that's the only downside of the day, that it rapidly became apparent that the Premier wouldn't be involved, and that detracted from the fulsomeness of the apology. However, I think the behaviour of many others on the government side, including several senior ministers, somehow counterbalanced, the failure of the Premier to put his body where how obviously agreed politically the government would stand. And because he did that, the Leader of the Opposition didn't speak either. I was very disappointed in that. But again, the former Leader of the Opposition, John Robertson, gave a tremendous speech.
About his son as well.
So this is what I mean, that people all found a personal connection to the issue. And this is what I think gave it its real value and profound impact that day. So all around me, all of us who had experienced 1978 were a bit overwhelmed. We weren't expecting them to be so personal in the way they expressed the apology. So and then it was a little tiring, but clearly they had decided, well, I'm going to go on the record here. I'm going to get up and say something. So there were many, many speeches, including from the Conservative side of the House, several of which I would, I won't forget how they said things, So it's, really, really good. And on the Labor side and the Greens, they were clearly more in tune with us, really. But they So I guess I felt even more strong reactions to their speeches. But really, it's unusual in the Parliament to have them thanking protesters and to acknowledge the role of protest, and to acknowledge this is what I've tried to get across that what we did in '78 in creating the Mardi Gras in particular, but more broadly, has made New South Wales a better place. It's the sort of place they want to see. They want and to continue down that road. So they also acknowledge we're still going down that road together, and I hope we can keep it all together. The Premier's role, obviously undermines us, but we also have the federal Liberal Party, which is really very obnoxious and difficult to cope with on these issues. But several of the Liberals in the state Parliament that they made direct criticisms of their federal colleagues before the Safe Schools program issue, for instance, for marriage equality debate. So I think, we did something very special that day, and Mike Baird aside, it was really well worth it, and it's all on the record, and I'm glad all those people are going to stand behind what they said that day.
There was another apology, in fact, two apologies from Fairfax, who owned the Sydney Morning Herald, which I think published the names, workplaces, possibly addresses of the 53 people arrested.
Yeah.
How did you feel about their two apologies? Because they had to make a second one too.
Yes, I feel like the first one was a public relations exercise, and it looks now like they were sort of goaded into it by News Limited. So, again, our community shouldn't be, a bit of political football or cannon fodder for, corporates or anyone to use in another battle. Anyway, I think all of us felt straight away, the 78 group, that the Fairfax writing that in the paper wasn't good enough, and in a way we were a bit slighted by it. So following the parliamentary one, we made contact with Darren Goodser and explained our feelings to him. And he, to his credit, he said, "Oh, okay, we certainly didn't intend to, convey anything like that." And so we got it across relatively easily that if you're going to apologise to somebody, you should do it in person, and you should do it, be the host of it. Look what they did in the Parliament. So he got it, and so eventually on June 24 this year, we had that apology at the Fairfax boardroom in Piermont, and I think again it was a wholehearted, sincere effort by the senior management. It wasn't the board, but I think we had a good representation there from senior management and senior writers, and a good exchange actually took place as well.
And of course, earlier this year, just before the Mardi Gras, we had the police apology, perhaps the big one. How did you feel about that?
Yes. Well, I think I was very disappointed. I felt a bit sorry for the liaison officer who did deliver the apology. Tony Crandall. Yeah, I was on the phone. I wasn't quite in the room when he did it. But so when I walked back in and this had happened, I thought, oh, dear me. Now we've got to cope with this. But again, I think Tony Crandall, he's a good liaison officer, and he couldn't possibly, I think, for himself stand up there without saying something like an apology. But he certainly didn't have the authority to give the apology that's required. And so I'm not going to really criticise him at all. I think it's really long overdue that this happens. So back in 1998, the Mardi Gras itself embraced the 78ers for the 20th anniversary. We had a big gathering in the Botanical Gardens to launch the program that year, and I don't know what the discussion was, but in the end I wrote a letter to the Police Commissioner and the Minister for Police asking for an apology for what took place in 1978, and I didn't even get a reply. So I certainly have been talking up the apology from the police, ever since. And I do think it's a crucial institutional change. So we've had this fight about equality, respect, and recognising the diversity of people in a lot of institutions in our society, including in the police, and we certainly haven't won the fight there. So this apology is very, very important for that step, and we have probably a pretty heavy, job in front of us yet to achieve it, if this year is anything to go by. So I think the current commissioner, there was a bit of to and fro after the parliamentary apology, and it was suggested that the police commissioner would do the apology if he was instructed to. So that was up to the police minister, and the police minister's got a government position there from that day in the apology. So I think they pursued it a little further, and the police commissioner then said, "You don't have the authority to direct me to apologise." So he's, I would say, absolutely opposed to any apology because of his own conservative attitudes, and there may be a lot of other traditional things going on in the police command about a thing like that as well, but he's the leader, and so he's definitely a focus for us to continue to pressure.
So do you feel there has been a police apology?
No, I feel the opposite. I feel that when they were asked to apologise, they ignored us, and then when they couldn't ignore us, they've said, no, we won't do it. So,
do you think there'll be a proper one day from the commissioner, not necessarily the current one, but a future one?
Well, I think there should be one, yes. It should happen, but you can never say, oh, it's inevitable. No, we have to manage the political debate and the sort of community consensus that will, in the end, get this change. It's very, very important for everybody that this change happens. It's part of the bigger picture about the role of the police in our society. It's really what we're up about. So,
how do you feel about the police marching in Mardi Gras?
I'm really happy that the police are out there marching. I always cheer them because those lesbians and gay police are, I think, having quite a difficult time in the police force in their day-to-day work. They in a way, by taking part in Mardi Gras, they're campaigning for change. And they probably get a bit of flack one way or the other after it as well. So I'm wholeheartedly with them. And, I think we have to support people in any institution who are fighting for the equality.
When you took part in that first Mardi Gras parade, back in the 24th of June 1978, did you ever dream that it would become what it's become today?
No. No, we just hoped it would be something which would make a change and grow our movement. And of course our movement had these basic demands about equality and dealing with homophobia and dealing with misogyny. It had all those elements in the movement. So we certainly hoped it would really make a difference. But we could never have imagined it would make such a difference. But even those early Mardi Gras, by 1984, we had the decriminalisation of male homosexual acts. That was a singularly big demand, all through the 70s. The Mardi Gras really was a significant contributor to that success, really important. So I would say, we were in the tens of thousands taking part then, not the hundreds of thousands, but there you go.
Every year I see you and your fellow 78ers on that 78er bus. Mm-hmm. How does it feel when you're on that bus and the crowd are cheering you on?
Well, I feel terrific. There's no doubt that the people really are happy to see us. They really, they're saying thank you. That's often what they actually say. Thank you, thank you. So you try to. I do laugh, at the moment of celebrity that's there, but it's actually a people-to-people thing, and we're not stars at all. But it's a moment when the real sinews, the blood and bone and brains and everything of creating something good gets recognised. So I'm very grateful for Mardi Gras for having that type of component in the parade, and the people are just so fabulous, you know. So I try to give back as much as I can in that stretch on the road. Every year it gets a little harder to do, you know, physically, but it's terrific.
What advice do you have for the organisers of Mardi Gras to improve it, if you have any?
I do, yes. I think this year especially was a problem with the commercialisation of the parade. I don't know, I've never been part of the board or anything like that, and I want, you know, Mardi Gras to succeed. But this year it was clear that 4 big corporations were able to, plus the police I think, were able to limit the size of the parade and limit the size of the community component of the parade and enhance the corporate component of the parade. So this is a pretty dangerous thing for Mardi Gras, in fact, to head down this track. It's succeeded against all odds for all these years because it's driven by a community that really wants to put on a great parade and show what they're thinking and feeling. And Mardi Gras board needs to really affirm that, and therefore, you know, the protests, the satire, the political commentary in it, that should be really encouraged and valued. It seems that different boards are different every year. It's a slightly different balance, and there's not a lot of continuity here in terms of real grasp of the basic dynamic of Mardi Gras itself. So I don't know how this can be fixed, quite frankly, but if the police say the Mardi Gras can only have so many people in the parade, why is that? There's no law that allows the police to do that, in fact. And so the agreement to do that cascaded down and limited quite energetic groups of people. And there's a little bit of too much preciousness then about some of the celebrities involved. So the issue about refugees, there was a no pride in detention contingent, and they wanted to say something to the senior politicians who were there. They weren't going to do anything violent or anything like that, but there was a very heavy hand put down on them. And that's completely upside down, you know. So there's something really to talk through, and I think going back to the origins of Mardi Gras is a very important way to allow the current generation of leaders and organisers to really see the potential of Mardi Gras each year.
When I've spoken to some of the 78ers, they tell me that in a lot of those early Mardi Gras, liberation was the message, gay liberation. Now the message is often one of equality, marriage equality. Do you think liberation and equality can work hand in hand, or they're contradictions?
Oh no, I think that they're just like different aspects of the same impulse. You know, liberation is a word that really resonated in the 60s and 70s, and it's you know, we've moved really on from gay liberation. You know, now we very aggressively, you know, asserting the diversity of sexual identities and embracing all of them. So it's probably a mistake just to say gay liberation anyway now. And the marriage equality, yes, it's got its conservative side, but really what's going on here is that certain really nasty conservative elements in our community, in our society, decided to use marriage to denigrate and oppress a large number of people in our community, a large minority. And we have to really overcome that. That's very important, not just about marriage equality, that's about equality. So, you know, it's against you know, discrimination on the grounds of race and gender, as well as sexuality, national origin, religion. All of these things are actually at stake. And that's why Mardi Gras has got a great role to play, still to fight for, and I would say it is liberation from oppression for a lot of people in our community, not just our immediate GLBTQI community.
You've touched on it, but a couple more questions. What do you think are some of the most valuable lessons we've learned since 1978?
Ooh. um, we've had a roller coaster, so it's not been a straight line experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I think 1978 and going forward, we've learned that you should persist. You should persist, and in the demand for equality and respect, we should always oppose discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been many, many milestones because of different laws and different institutions, and we're still definitely in the fight.
Mm-hmm.
So I think again we've had, I can't quite get the right word. There's contradictions in our community, of
Mm-hmm.
course, which have meant that the more radical element was really quite sidelined for a while. There was no real need for that to happen, for Mardi Gras to succeed. But it's now come back into a more unified movement, but in a more overall conservative period, a more corporate type of social time. So we should resist. I think we should always learn that the community is the source of our strength, that the corporation, the big business is not the source of our strength. We have to somehow get them on side or neutralise them, at least not them against us. But relying on that sort of element in the society to make progress is very uncertain, doesn't really work. Yeah.
What advice would you give the young Peter Murphy of 1978?
Oh dear. I would look back on that young person and say, don't give up. You did the right thing.
What advice do you have for the young activists of today?
Don't give up. And the advice I give at the rallies I speak at now is to continue to educate yourself and to continue to organise. Don't feel like you're alone. You really succeed by working together with people. So be organised about it. Don't be frightened to be organised. Yeah.
And finally, what are your hopes for the future?
My hopes. I think we're in a very turbulent period now. There's really a lot of opportunities for good things to happen. And the good thing being to end really bad oppressive practices in our society, whether we see them with Aboriginal people or with refugees or migrants or GLBTQI, disabled people. There's a lot of good initiatives and impulses, and against that we've got this sort of weird, almost inhuman calculus of profit and investment and so on going on, which obliterates the concerns which are behind all of these impulses. So I think my hope is somehow we can rise above the level of all of the good work we're doing now to somehow convince or change the power structure enough that the meeting human needs and helping each other is the primary objective of our society, not a sort of a potential, sideline result. So that's a big call, but that is a potential. We have that hope, and we could do it.
Peter Murphy, thank you very much.
Okay, William, thank you. We made it.